I want to ask forgiveness of the audience for an assortment of different things that couldn't be controlled today, including the power going out on what is a big day for our show and Meadowlark Media. But it's not my biggest apology that I want to submit. My biggest apology is that I could not listen to the two segments done before this one, as Stugotz has been left to his own devices. And Stugotz, as soon as the lights went out in our previous studio, started putting Larry Bird and the Chief and an assortment of other people at that game who were not at that game, because he takes advantage of anarchy situations to just say what he wants, even if it's false and uncomfortable. And now Team B, I'm sorry, I shouldn't do that. That hurts.
We don't do that.
That's
yeah. We say Team Dan, Team Stu.
Yeah.
B team got real hairy there.
Yeah, Stugotz got emotionally hurt by B team when he was doing it by himself. Team Stugotz was left to its own devices for two segments, Mike, and I don't have the bandwidth, and you don't have the bandwidth to have checked what those segments were and are that Stugotz just did when left to his own devices. I do not trust him. You know this. And I am fearful of whatever it is that he's putting out by himself over there. It might be Knicks talk for all I know.
It's not just Stugotz that you need to worry about. It's a combination of Stugotz and Billy, which is why I put in my spy, Jeremy Taché, to kind of just be the adult in the room, even though, according to tenure, he's here the shortest amount of time.
According to tenure, he's 10 years old. He's been in the mid-tenure. Jeremy Taché is what we're trusting over there. He's embryonic. He smells like embryonic fluid.
Tell me I'm lying to you when I say I trust Jeremy more than anyone.
I trust him more than anybody
in
over
that
there.
group.
You're absolutely right. There's Greg Cody. You heard him, perhaps, just clearing his throat into the microphone. Greg, thank you.
I was cackling. That was actually a cackle.
Thank you for all your.
We need you. We need you, Greg.
We need you here because I want to talk about a couple of different things that I don't want to just skip past today, because the last game is the most important game and it is the most fun thing to talk about. Can we talk for a second about Game 6?
Please.
I want to, well, Tony says please, and Mike just shakes his head no, because he's still mad about it. He's pretending he's not mad about it, but it was the ref's job, tenths of a second. We're going to lose now. Mike Ryan, you were off to sea. You drifted off to sea. I need you to admit it in front of everybody.
Yeah, I was off to sea. I was. It was a terrible performance from the stars of the Miami Heat. You were counting on Duncan Robinson to be the tough one mentally, and you knew that he was going to eat in that scenario, but then he missed two wide open gym jump shots that were completely bewildering for someone who statistically is one of the greatest three-point shooters in the history of the game.
$5, Cody.
Game 6 was a disaster. Game 6 was a disaster. And also, I'm still confused as to how Miami had an opportunity to win that game, because Miami was so poor, so terrible. Gave up second and third chance opportunity after third chance opportunity to Boston. Boston was dying to give that game away, and they almost did. And if it wasn't for Max Strus totally ball watching on that final play, it's over there. It's over then and there. Oh, Game 6 pissed me off. Game 6 really pissed me off. The officiating was bad. I can't believe the Miami Heat survived Tony Brothers and Scott Foster. It wasn't even close. And they wore the black uniforms. In our faces, they wore the black uniforms.
Couple of things. One, I love Max Strus like a brother. I think him and I on a team would be very good together. One,
for the love of God.
Two, he was a photographer on that last inbounds play. A photographer. Do you know what that means, Dan? He was taking pictures. The rebound was there, and he was taking pictures of the rebound.
Do I know what that means to be a photographer?
In a rebound setting, if you're a photographer, that means you're watching somebody else get the rebound and you're taking a mental picture of it. So Max took a bit of a mental picture. Derek White put that in. But for me, it was like, how do you have Jimmy and Bam go, what was it, 9 for 74 from the field? Like, it was one of the most incredible games I've ever seen where nothing was getting. Back to the basket, shots for Bam, nothing. Jimmy at the cup, nothing. It was like, this game should be over before it even started. And
Jimmy
somehow
had no legs.
Nothing.
Jimmy had no legs. You could see in Game 7, his lift was a lot better. But I also don't know if that was just because he abandoned the pump fake altogether. Game 6, there is a growing list, and people just choose to forget them when it comes to Bam performances. Like I reminded you not so long ago, the one field goal made performance with your season on the line against Chicago. That game 6 that Bam had was atrocious. He wasn't very good last night, but we had guys like Caleb Martin, and Gabe Vincent is going to, people keep talking about Caleb Martin and the money that he made himself. He's under contract for another year. Gabe Vincent, a 3-and-D guy, has absolutely earned a ton of money in these playoffs.
That's one of the charms about the Heat's playoff run and this team in general is all of the points and all of the clutch performances they're getting from the quote undrafted guys. And Spo hates using that term because he thinks it's disrespectful. But Gabe Vincent scores 29 points, a career playoff high. We just had Caleb Martin score 26, a career playoff high. Duncan shows up every third game. So does Max Strus. This team could win an NBA championship, even though Jimmy Butler takes a night off every once in a while because his ankle's not quite right, even though Bam is Bam every third game where he's got the 11 points on terrible shooting. And yet here they are. I think it's an amazing story that they're getting so much from their bench. Undrafted players had 76 points a couple of games ago. It's remarkable.
Can we talk about the injuries? Because I've listened to Boston Celtics podcast several since the result, and everyone's mentioning the Jayson Tatum injury. And to a degree, I do think it's fair because defensively, once Spo realized it very late in that game that he could hunt him defensively, you had to consider just pulling Jayson Tatum off the court at that point. But it was a little late before Spo figured that out. But are we really going to do this? We can't do this with the Jayson Tatum injury.
This is what I'm going to do, Mike. This is okay. Like, we don't have to turn this into it matters from a credit perspective or respect perspective.
People are making that the result.
But let's do this. The year that Giannis won the title, weren't there an assortment of injuries to every single team that they played?
Yeah.
What you have to do this time of year is just be healthy enough that maybe some of the luck breaks your way. And you know what? Jokic gets hurt in the first game in the finals, and you happen to be there, and Boston isn't because you just got there. Like, you need luck to win these. These things are hard to win, Mike. Like, I know you trade Bam every 3 games, but it is hard to get to the point where you're this close all the time. All the time, teams and franchises fall back, and instead of concentrating on the injuries with Boston or the injuries with the Heat, the Heat have had more injuries than any team in the sport this year. They've lost more games to injury, and what? They're in the finals, and it doesn't matter whether they got there because Tatum's foot got hurt or didn't get hurt. He didn't do anything in the final game when they needed him, and they lost by 20 points because they're structurally flimsy because Jaylen Brown was outplayed by Caleb Martin, period, not comma. Period. Outplayed their second best player. They needed him to be a number 1. And instead, Miami got a number 1 type performance where the announcers are saying, Stan Van Gundy is saying on television, Jimmy Butler looks intimidated. Caleb Martin did not look intimidated. How the bleep in a game 7 in Boston does Caleb Martin not look intimidated? How does Caleb Martin think that he belongs in that arena where Stugotz put Larry Bird and Robert Parrish even though they weren't there?
The Chief.
I mean, the Heat are missing Tyler Hero. They're missing 20 points a game from one of their most dynamic players, and the Celtics are going to make excuses? You're right. Miami had the 4th most man games missed by injury in the entire NBA this season. They're also missing Oladipo. You can't use an excuse. You can't say Jayson Tatum hurt his ankle.
But it's not an excuse. It's an explanation.
But that's not the way they lost, though.
No, but of course it's a different game if he's healthy. Doesn't that go without saying? It's obviously a different game. He really matters to them. Look, imagine what the Heat would have looked like.
It was also a 20-point beatdown. It was also a 20-point beatdown. I understand, but he was still knocking down open Jays. The problems were defensively, I really think. And the Heat went way too long before they realized he was a problem on defense.
Mike, this is what I would say to you, and I believe it is something that will go overlooked as people talk about the Tatum injury, the Brogdon injury. He is important to setting up their offense. When he's not the one setting up their offense, it's Derek White and Marcus Smart that you're asking to complement Jayson Tatum. That's not what he had next to him all year. They had to pull Brogdon. He was minus 15 and they had to pull him in the game because he was 0 for 3 and he couldn't make anything. He's part of them not being able to make any of their threes.
It's a flawed team, and you realize how much the Danilo Gallinari injury before the season killed them, because he was exactly what they were missing against Miami.
The one thing with Malcolm Brogdon too, like, yes, he's a great player, and yes, he's what they wanted to make that offense run, but when you took him out, it's like a chess piece. You take him out, you insert Derek White. He was the spark plug for the entire series for the Celtics. Like, if Derek White isn't there, Malcolm Brogdon is not the offensive player that Derek White has been the last 4 or 5 games in that series.
We applauded Brad Stevens' offseason because on a team that made it to the NBA Finals, a team that finally got over that Miami hump, they found a way to improve. They got Brogdon and Gallinari for those matchups to take them to the next level. Gallinari wasn't available to them. Brogdon was obviously not the same player.
Greg, as our resident homer, because there were a number of startling things happening. Duncan Robinson, viewed as the weakest among the Heat, cupping a hand to his ear in a silent Boston. Duncan Robinson taunting the Celtics crowd. I want to know if Homer Greg Cody, after a game, after 50 years in this business, has ever felt worse than after Game 6 of Miami losing with a 10th of a second left in a confusion of looking at replay to see if Derek White's shot actually was something that beat the buzzer. Have you ever at the end of a game with your regional pride felt worse?
Yeah, and by the way, part of the reason they lost that Game 6 was because Duncan Robinson missed 2 wide open looks on threes. Yeah, it ranks up there. I mean, Mike has mentioned the game football loss because of a referee's call in the Fiesta Bowl. I remember the Dolphins 41-38 playoff grueling overtime game against the Chargers. I mean, there have been other heartaches, but to me, this heartache disappears because they won Game 7. It goes away. It didn't even happen because they won Game 7. That's what a crucible this game was in Miami Heat history, and they won. That kind of thing.
Because we are so disjointed today, because I'm uncomfortable and awkward under all circumstances, because I can't just into a talkback ask Mike Ryan privately in his headset why he seems distraught or hurt or wounded in general by the performance of our show today. Did you just drop your head into your hands last segment because I asked Greg Cody a question and he decided to again mention that Duncan Robinson missed 2 threes as if he weren't with us earlier in the show when you mentioned that, or he was here but clearly not listening, and so we wanted to make the important point that had already been made? Is that why you dropped your head in your hands, or was there another reason?
Contrary to the entire history of this show as evidence, I'm a bit of a perfectionist. And I'm actually really proud of how today's show has gone. We mobilized pretty quickly and we're doing this for our audience and we're getting them some content. But yeah, as someone that likes to consider themselves a perfectionist, today has been an absolute train wreck for me. And seeing a real professional outfit in the Dan Patrick Show kind of laugh at us. And not like, haha, this is funny. Like, oh, no, it's actually
not kind of
like, oh, everything that they say in the self-deprecating thing, it's just this huge bandage for an operation that's just shoddy. It's a shoddy operation. And we were finally announcing ourselves. We have this big fancy studio that can compete with the Dan Patricks of the world. And the power goes out, but not enough to actually end the interview and save face. No, for whatever reason, the only thing that works is our connection to embarrassment in Dan Patrick Show, so everyone can see what a poor operation we've got.
Put it on the poll, please, Juju, at LeBatard Show. Is Greg Cody the human impediment to perfectionism? because it is a difficult wrangle under the best of circumstances. Keep in mind, in the rotten apple doesn't fall far from the tree. As far as I can tell, Chris Cody is still back in the penalty box since impersonating Jessica in the dark. We haven't found or seen him since then. I want to throw a stat at you guys. If you guys really want to think that the measurements between these two teams make any sense or can be divided by injury or a tenth of a second, do you realize how crazy it is that the last 23 times that the home team has played between the Celtics and Heat, the home team's record in those games is 7-16. That's the Pistons this year. That's the Pistons this year at home. Is the home team is simply unable to win a game that matters unless they've got a tenth of a second given to them by the referees. And then sometimes you get a situation where a home team might win one of these games. 7-16 at home, the home team's record. That's crazy.
Dan and Greg, you've obviously covered Pat Riley for a long time, and in Dan's case, you've gotten really close to Pat Riley, and you asked me how Game 6 sat with me, and obviously I had a huge hole in my stomach, and it bothered me from the moment that it happened. But I'm just naturally predisposed to know that Spo and the Miami Heat, it's not going to bother them nearly as much. And I've bought in to that aura of Pat. And what I'm asking you is, did you also think that it wouldn't affect them?
I find it impossible to think that they just produced a game that surprised me more than Game 6 in Boston last year when Jimmy Butler went up there. And somehow that's as surprised as I've ever been by a Heat team. And doing this way, even with a Tatum injury, was more surprising to me than that, especially when you pair it against some of the great things here, which is hole in your stomach for 2 days. And in the middle of this fire, this has become a legitimate rivalry, like where two teams, people will laugh if they don't win championships, but history in Miami will remember that at a time Miami and Boston, a young Boston team, and Miami were fighting for the strength at the top of the conference, that Miami wrestled it away from Boston, even though Boston looked like it had younger players who needed some of the toughness that Miami has with all of its undrafted players. Greg, I want to bring you in as somebody who knows the history of the sport. Pat Riley has been in Winning Time by Adam McKay on HBO since the 80s. Pat Riley has been bleep Boston. I've talked to Pat Riley off air during this series. He enjoys more the feeling of being alive in a road arena before he's won the game. Just the fear, the doubt, the challenge, the competition. He enjoys more, obviously, winning on the road, but playing on the road and being in the middle of what feels like hostility. What he says is, what if you lose, they're not going to hang you in the town square by your thumbs. It's just more alive. So he's not afraid of those moments. He welcomes them. And you saw, Greg, in the press conference after Spoelstra lost, he's like, I want to start and play again right now, because there's something about the buzz of that fear that makes these guys bare their fangs, like they enjoy the challenge of maximum challenge.
Yeah, Riley's been like that. I think he was steeled into that in the manner in which he left the Knicks and the reaction he got when he went back to Madison Square Garden. And ever since then, he has absolutely reveled in being hated. That's why what happened during the Big Three era with LeBron down here for 4 years was so perfect, is because that team reveled in being the national villain and being booed everywhere they went. And this team has a little bit of that. And Riley was a very psychological based coach, and so is Spoelstra. They never sound more like protege and mentor than when Spoelstra is playing a most devastating loss to his advantage. And I believe he did that. And I think he honestly, and Jimmy Butler is right there with it, because he thinks like that. And for those two to be able to turn around this team's psyche and make fuel from it, I think is, again, one of the most remarkable things about this remarkable run.
If there was ever a case for sports manifestation, when they played that press conference of Jimmy after losing Game 7, where he's like, hey, we're going to be right here again next year, and we're going to win it. Fast forward a year later, almost to the day, and they're up by 20 in the Garden, and it's like, how did he do this? All season, he's been the drumbeat of, we're going to do it, guys. Don't worry about this. Everything's going to be okay. Don't worry, don't worry. And he finally does it. And to credit where Spo and Pat Riley, like, when you have such a devastating loss where you're about to go to the NBA Finals and it's taken from you in a matter of 2 seconds off an inbounds pass, to get back up and try to reach the level that you need to for a Game 7 in Boston is incredible. So like that coaching, the coaching staff in its entirety, for them to take those players and elevate them to that level, they deserve everything.
Okay, you and Greg Cody are doing one thing. I would say the inspirational videos and the inspirational speeches did not injure Jayson Tatum's ankle, which
but that wasn't it.
But Mike, why were you waving a hand off at Greg Cody while he was talking?
I was waving a hand off at Tony because, yes, I've gotten the goosebumps watching Jimmy Butler's speech from last year's Eastern Conference Finals. And I saw what he said prior to Game 7. And it was the exact same thing he said prior to Game 6. He guaranteed victory before Game 6. He put up an egg, but he would have had the moment.
He's Stugotz. He just keeps saying.
It's the manifestation.
No, it's not the manifestation. It is.
Just keep saying it.
It just keeps saying it, and it did manifest.
Much like Stugotz,
Bishop to Rook 9.
Much like Stugotz, he just gets away with it because everyone just understands that's how Jimmy Butler operates. He kind of has to say that stuff, so we won't hold him accountable for it.
Dan, you are letting Boston off so easy by blaming it on Tatum's injury. Without Tatum, all of the other players on that team, not named Tatum, were 8 for 42 from the three-point line. That's why they lost that game. It wasn't because Tatum was injured.
Greg,
that was a factor, of course.
If Jayson Tatum is not the solar system around which everything there revolves to make it easier, while averaging 30 points a game in playoff games more often than Larry Bird did. If he is not there to be that, and if we're all on television and on the sidelines watching as their number one can't play basketball, and Mike Ryan and Stugotz are saying today, you got to bench him in the second half. Stugotz for Blake Griffin. If it's that much of a problem that they're playing, if they're playing 5 against 4 because their best player is someone that Mike and Stugotz are saying should be benched, yeah, of course, you would like to think that in that same situation, Max Strus and Duncan Robinson and Gabe Vincent would go 15 for 30 from 3, but the game gets a lot harder when at the end of it, Spoelstra is concentrating on Game 6, just making sure Tatum doesn't get the ball, so the shot they get at the end of that game is a spinning loop-de-loop crazy Marcus Smart 3 because it's the best they can do when their best guy is guarded. Don't tell me that doesn't matter.
It does matter, but where you miss me with that is when you start rattling off the names that Miami had to turn to, because we're just casually accepting that Spoelstra made it to the Eastern Conference Finals without his second best offensive player in Tyler Hero, with all these undrafted players. Yeah, Jayson Tatum is banged up and he can't do the same things. He's still out there on the court. He's toughing it out. He's randomly not getting treatment on this ankle, which is a little bit weird, but he's got Jaylen Brown there. He's got the former defensive player of the year, Marcus Smart. Jimmy Butler is doing this with Gabe Vincent and Caleb Martin, who was waived by the Hornets. Like, this is guts. This is guile. This is all those things that you attribute to Heat culture. Yeah, Tatum's hobbled. Is that not the 2 seed? Is that not a Game 7 in the vaunted TD Garden? Caleb Martin's delivering. They have a really good team outside of Jayson Tatum. You wouldn't have any evidence of that from Game 7.
Agreed. I would just say to you that the way Jimmy Butler looked in Game 6, you saw how the Heat looked when he looked like that. I don't want to just skip merrily past the fact that Stan Van Gundy was saying on television, Jimmy Butler looks intimidated. And when Jimmy Butler looks intimidated, what happened? They had no business being in that game. The Celtics missed 11 shots in a row against that Miami Heat team where Jimmy Butler looked intimidated, but Miami looked terrible in a game at home and ultimately lost a game at home because your number one player at this time of year really matters. the number one player on any team throughout the history of the sport. If that guy is hobbled, you got a problem, Greg. You think that's me diminishing what the Heat accomplished?
Yes, because despite Jimmy Butler scoring 14 points and looking terrible, they were a 10th of a second from winning anyway.
He made it.
Damn it.
This continues to be a chaotic apocalypse today. We do not have power at our studios. A really unfortunate time for that to happen. I would say that in the last 10 years of making content, there is one day that needed to not happen. And that day was today. So Chris Cody, can't find him, might be on his train still, penalty box. Don't know how he got Grandpa Cody to the train on time, but we can't find Chris Cody. And I need more information on how much fallout there was the last time that we split teams up into what was called A team and B team, and what was the B team did not like the appraisal. I don't know what the details of that are. Was it Stugotz who was complaining about that?
Tony, weren't you a former member of B Team?
I was a part of Team Zebra, which is what we called ourselves, not B Team. We changed it, flipped it on its head. We were Team Z, and then Whitty, for some reason, who was the adult in the room at that time that Mike sent over, he coined us Team Zebra. So yeah, it was fun.
How did you get promoted to Team Dan? How did that happen?
Because people need to talk about real hoopers, and all of a sudden, boom, here we are.
Yeah, but why do you and Mike, you were making fun during a break here of Tony saying, and we didn't make any fun of him, or not nearly enough fun, saying he and Max Strus would make a good team because they both have similar balls and shooting prowess. What was Tony doing there?
I don't know why Tony decided to just volunteer that his game pairs well with Max Strus before actually giving us some analysis on the game. But Tony is here because we need that kind of analysis here. In the ensemble, I'm just, I'm kind of a puppet master. I realize that there's some hijinks. There's a professional stand-up comedian with Stugotz. Billy, I could see that going off the rails. So what do I need? I need Jeremy Taché to bring facts and be an adult there.
Right, but we've
already
already
Tony
got
over there. It's too much. Tony over here, it's a nice little dollop of just his.
Okay, but we've already got Greg Cody's rodeo clown of, which is enough for everybody. We don't need any more rodeo clown over here. We've got the maximum.
And don't forget
amount.
just my natural disposition, which is also very,
and mine, which is also very.
Chris Cody here to kind of balance all that out, but Chris Cody's with a different on Adnan Burke.
Okay. We will get everybody together. We will get team together, everybody in hour two. But you were naturally doing the right thing and explaining to the listener that's probably very confused right now is why we're in the situation that we're in. But we've never actually told the audience this. As much as we love the Ulcer is still very much under construction. It is a soft opening, and that's why occasionally you'll be hearing fire alarms go off in the background, and we'll have police officers make sure everything's up to code. We'll hear drilling, which I know some of you may have picked up on occasionally on our podcast. The building is still very much under construction. Okay, but I need to explain also to the audience that basically from where we were to where we are jumping from a crumbling physically building that was flooding with air conditioning. One day we came in after the weekend and there was water up to our ankles and there were pipes and wires everywhere. We are jumping from one lily pad to another, again, without missing shows the way we didn't miss shows after we left ESPN. And it's why we're a slipshod organization in general. And some days we don't have power. I'm just saying that at any point in the last 10 years, it would have been better for this to happen than the time that it happened. In fact, I'm going to say at any point in the last 18 years, it would have been better. And we were in a building originally that I would simply describe as the poltergeist house when it was falling apart. So I want to just read to you a couple of things here. And because we don't have sound, we're just going to play sound from Mike's phone in a second, because that is the height of the entertainment ladder where we now reside with the Bill Simmonses and the Dan Patricks and the Pat McAfees of the world. And pardon my takes here from Ball Don't Lie. I am far from Bill Simmons' biggest fan. I rag on him in group chats often, but methinks the media members taking the opportunity on him today are just a wee bit jealous. Bottom line, Bill Simmons money makes Stephen A. Smith money look like fifth grade allowance. And my question to you guys, the group, is, do you believe that any of that money comforts him today?
No, I don't. As someone that listened to his content today, I don't think it makes him feel better. I think he'd give up half that money to get out from paying Jaylen Brown $50 million, which is what he's rumored to be looking for.
Let me ask the question a different way. The man who had an emergency 90-minute podcast on Sunday to celebrate the 10th of a second where the season of the Boston Celtics got saved, and then flew to Boston yesterday to have a courtside seat to his best player injured on the first play of the game. Do you believe that that human being is saying to himself as he walks like Kendall Roy out of the Succession conference room where he has been shivved by Shiv, do you believe that he checks his bank account today and says, well, at least I have this. It doesn't feel quite so bad. I'll go to one of my homes in Malibu and cry there?
Yeah, a little bit though. Like the home in Malibu.
Yeah,
he's physically leaving the TD Garden to go patch himself up over in his home in Malibu. I actually do think that makes him feel a lot better.
But this is what I would say to all of America today, though, because if Bill Simmons is going to be the hood ornament or avatar on Boston privilege and Boston winning and Boston whining, then the greatest thing in all of sports is going to be to enjoy the misery of someone who has lost, that you can laugh at in sports, the way that you can laugh at Nick Saban when he does a lot of winning all over the place, but when he falls on his face, you end up laughing at it a little bit, because enjoying the misery of others is something that is one of the great sports joys that there are.
Dude, I'm just happy it's not us. Someone was going to get laughed at hard, considering the shape that this series took after Game 6. I'm just so happy. I'm more relieved than happy that my team is in the NBA Finals, if that makes any sense. I'm more relieved that I don't have to hear Boston celebrating and Miami becoming memed than I am to actually be in the NBA Finals.
Human nature, right, is that we enjoy the suffering of the rich more than we enjoy the suffering of the poor, because the poor suffer enough. But when the rich suffer, it's like when an athlete is injured or suffering or crying after a game. The reaction is vitriolic. It's like, he's crying all the way to the bank. He's making $40 million a year. Save the tears, buddy. So when Bill Simmons, of all people, is showing the face he's showing yesterday, I think we delight in that a little bit.
But wait a minute, though. This is what I would tell you of all of Boston, though. This is one of the things that makes the misery such a delight. Do you who are listening to this understand how much that city cares about that team? The Patriots were laughing stock for generations before they were Tom Brady's team. That team, that history, Red Auerbach, we invented basketball. Bill Russell is bigger than Michael Jordan. That franchise is what matters to generations handed down in that city. More than hockey, more than football, maybe the same as baseball, but baseball hasn't had that kind of winning. Basketball is what matters. And to know that that kind of caring is being beaten by a South Florida that Mike Ryan shrugged and has been telling you games ago, our team's not that good. Yeah, I don't expect anything from them.
Not good. Not good. Not a good team.
Bad team.
A bad team made the NBA Finals. We're a bad team. This is the worst Heat team in several years, and they just trounced Boston in Game 7 at their own place.
Dan, what were the stats you gave a couple segments ago? They were like 30th in this, 25th in scoring. They were one of the worst teams in the NBA, and now they're in the finals.
And on top of that, they were like super hurt in
right.
this postseason.
They're
a bad team.
They were dead last in the NBA in scoring, weren't they? The Heat. Dead last.
They're not a good team. They're a bad team.
Bad team.
The apparently in today's NBA, bad teams can make the finals.
Yeah, but Caleb Martin, oh man,
I have no idea. I have no idea how to explain this. And part of the tears I was trying to drink up last night on EEI and the Sports Hub was a lot of that was happening, Dan. A lot of people were saying, the Red Sox are down. The Bruins seem to be headed in the wrong direction now. The Patriots have fallen off, and we wonder what they'll be in a post-Tom Brady world. This was supposed to be this core's time to take that market, for Boston to become a basketball town, and they lost to Jimmy Butler and a bunch of undrafted guys.
Let's play some of this sound. Mike, how many hours did you spend without your wife, or your wife catching you partaking in the hub?
I finally went to bed at around 1:30 a.m. after I was hubbing all night.
Hubbing all night and hubba here. Did you hear Ryan Cortez call in? Because I believe this was the best call so far from Ryan Cortez, Parakeet Cortez. He called in. Put your phone up to the microphone here, Mike, so that people can hear here at the top of the entertainment ladder, you just playing your phone for a national and international audience. Ryan Cortez calling.
Dan, I appreciate the setup, but you have to keep in mind I had another sound queued up on my phone, so you got.
All right, we'll play that one. You can play. I'll set that one up instead. Here is Mike Schur and Bill Simmons telling you exactly what was going to happen in their haunted house from the Bill Simmons podcast a couple of months ago. Mike Schur has disappeared. Meadowlark employee has run for the hills. He doesn't want to be on. He is in hiding. Let's hear that sound from the Bill Simmons podcast with Mike Schur.
When there's the one guy in the horror movie who keeps pointing out to everybody else that something bad's going to happen and nobody believes him. And he almost starts to seem annoying after a little while, but then it turns out he was right. And somebody's coming out of the basement. You've been that way with the Miami Heat on our Celtics text thread all year. You've been very focused on it. All these dumb garbage losses. The Heat were like 10-12. They were 13-14. Like they were never a threat to anyone but you. And now they're still lingering, and we're going to go into how weird their season has been. We're talking about sports hate right now. We don't actually hate these people, but we sports hate certain teams, the Yankees, the Lakers. I sports hate the Heat. I just want them to go away, and I know they won't.
This is the problem with the Heat, is they don't go away. They're the equivalent of the Steelers, I would say, in the NFL, where like the Steelers start out like 3-7. You're like, this is the year that they fall apart. And at the end of the year, somehow they're like, whatever, 9-8. And they still don't have a losing season, and they're in the mix going into the last weekend, and they might make the playoffs, and if they do, they're dangerous. Nobody wants to play them in the playoffs. That's the Miami Heat. I've been yelling and screaming about this. This is an invasion of the body snatchers. And I have been saying the whole year, like, don't let these guys linger. And one of the problems has been these teams that play them, they rest all their guys. They're like, we don't care. They're a middling team. So like the Nuggets rest Jokic, and the Bucks rest Giannis, and then the Heat squeak out these 2-3-point wins, and you look up and suddenly I said this in our thread the other night, we are careening toward a 2-7 first round matchup, Celtics Heat, and I am going to be terrified.
Do you understand, in the vanity of the television ego business, how hard it is to not be able to enjoy at all how right you actually were? We love nothing more than being right. No one in the media was more right about what these teams were than Bill Simmons and Mike Schur, and no one in the media feels more wrong today about their right than Bill Simmons and Mike Schur.
You know what I think was the greatest thing about Game 6, Dan? Was despite all of their hope and belief that Miami was actually going to be the boogeyman again, that all went away with Derek White's game winner. They all thought they were cruising, and they smited the beast. And it's perfect that it went the way that it did.